Jimmy, I'm going to mess up your live broadcast here. Can you unplug me a second? Thank you.
Donovan Dean, get down right now.
All right, we're back here. Sing praises rising.
Praises rising, eyes are turning to you. We turn to you. Hope is stirring, hearts are yearning for you. We long for you. See you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Hosanna, Hosanna, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus.
Hear the sound of hearts.
Hear the sound of hearts returning to you. We turn to you. In your kingdom, broken lives are made new. You make us new. When we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Hosanna, Hosanna, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. 'Cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away. 'Cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Hosanna, Hosanna, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Hosanna, Hosanna.
our desire to worship you this evening in spirit and in truth. So Lord, we just pray that you would meet us here. Help us to just put aside everything else that's going on in our lives now, Lord, and just focus on you, the creator of the universe, the sustainer of all life. You knit us together in our mother's wombs. You gave us the breath that we needed to wake up this morning. So, Father, we've come just to worship you for who you are. Worthy of every song.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you.
Jesus, the name above every name.
Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
I will build my life.
And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And only there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
Before I spoke a word,
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
I was your foe.
When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
No shadow you won't light up.
No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
God sent his son.
God sent his son. They called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. A greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross that river, I'll fight life's fight, no war with pain. more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. How I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. My one defense. You're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
Father, we need you every hour, every minute. Lord, just remind us of our dependence on you, that we can do nothing apart from you, that it is your strength and power working through us that allows us to do anything, Father. So we come tonight for just a fresh filling of your word. We want your word to light our path, Lord, a path of obedience and love for you, God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Unmute. There we go. Sorry. All right. Good evening, everybody. As you can tell, I am not Pastor Ray. Pastor Ray is unfortunately not feeling very well today, so I am filling in for him tonight. So just keep him in his prayers for, it doesn't seem to be anything too serious, just a chance to get a little rest and get feeling better for him tonight. So open your Bibles, if you would, please, to the book of Ecclesiastes, right in chapter 1. So Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We are going to, well, we're not going to be ambitious enough to think we could finish a book in a night, but what we are going to do is just go through as much as we can tonight of the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes falls under the book of wisdoms, and it is one of those books that can be difficult to understand, because this is one of those books that kind of falls under like part of the book of Job does, where if you get very tempted to think everything said has to be true, you're going to get very confused in this book. You have to understand what this book is in its totality. The book of Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon, although he's not named that by name directly, but as you piece together all of the clues given about the writer, you'll realize very quickly it can only be King Solomon, and we'll point out some of those as we go along. But the key thing with the book of Ecclesiastes, what we're going to be doing is reading in chunks, and then we'll stop and break down a little bit, and then read another big chunk and break it down. This is one of those books that I personally find you have to read in chunks. If you attempt to study it, read one verse, what does that mean? Next verse, what does that mean? You're going to lose the context. Much like Jesus' parables, if you don't read the whole parable at once before you try and go back and figure it out, it gets really difficult to figure out. So you need to see the whole of what's happening here. One thing that really helped transform my understanding of the book of Ecclesiastes was one time I was reading it and it just dawned on me, like, this writing style seems very familiar to me. And the reason it seems so familiar to me is, well, my degrees from college are in science, and this is written very much like a scientific paper. One of the things that's interesting, we know about Solomon, if you read the books of Kings and stuff, he was a scientist. He was a guy who not only had all this wisdom, but he was a guy, it says that he did a lot with studying animals. He was a biologist, and he studied birds, and he studied physics, and he studied everything there was in science. And he actually approaches this book, it's written very much like a scientific paper would be written today. He is going to start by stating a problem that he saw. And that's what the first chapter more or less is I see this glaring problem in life. And then the rest of the middle, all the rest of the book, except the last two verses, are going to be what I tried to do to figure out this problem. And he's going to tell you, I tried this, and this was the result, and I tried this, and this was the result, and I tried this. And then the second to last verse in the book of Ecclesiastes, which we will not make it to tonight, what basically starts off with him saying, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. So a lot of people can get very confused by this book if you don't look at it in its totality. You have to understand what he's doing. And that's what we are going to try and do tonight, not through the whole book, but try and take that larger overview of what Solomon is saying and what he's doing, because it is very applicable in today's world. It is not only very applicable for those that are unbelievers and those that are lost out there and what they are experiencing and feeling every day of their life, but it is also very applicable for the believer who has ceased to chase after God with their whole heart and start chasing after things of this world as well. And it will help explain why a lot of us end up exactly where we are in life, and help us in understanding as we're watching the world around us go into chaos. And I don't just mean on the news, right? Talking about lives in our families, lives in our neighbors, kids in school. Their lives are falling apart, and we see suicide higher than it's ever been. We see more and more people needing anti-anxiety medications, anti-anxiety, anti-depression pills, and therapy for these things. This is going to help us to understand how the world has gotten to this place. So with that said, let's start off with chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labors, in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes towards the south and it turns around to the north. It wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, and they return again. All things are full of labor, man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of the former things, nor will there be any remembrance of the things that are to come by those who will come after. There's the problem. He looked around, Solomon looks around and he says, I have no satisfaction in life. He goes, what's very interesting about it is he says a few things in here that are kind of wrong, and he says a few things that make you go, wow, I didn't know they understood that back then. The understanding they had of the way the world works, because, right, we all have what I like to call a recency bias or a progressive view of history, which means, well, of course, living now, we're smarter and better than everyone who lived before us. It has to be, right? Well, we get taught that, actually, believe it or not, and it's hard to break ourselves with that thinking. But Solomon here, I want to point out first the term vanity of vanities. Okay, it's a word we don't use a lot in this context anymore. But the thing basically means it's useless. Not only useless, but there's a connotation to the word that means fleeting. Poof, gone like a breath. It's just there, then it's gone. And that's part of its uselessness. And he starts putting out, he says, listen, you work hard under the sun, you toil under the sun. And anybody who's worked hard under the sun, and I know a few of you here have, that's a special kind of labor, right? We all get exhausted by work, but that's a special kind of exhaustion. He says, what's the profit of it? Listen, you get old, you die. Kids grow up, then they die. They have kids, they grow up, and generation after generation just comes and comes and comes. And he starts talking about the circuits of life, basically the circles that happen. Not only does generation after generation follow and pass, day after day, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, the wind. He talks about atmospheric air patterns. It's like crazy. Like, think of those maps. What does he say? The wind follows its circuit. He has the understanding of it. He talks about the water cycle. He talks about all these things that he's pointing out. Look at just how this all goes around and around. There is nothing new. I sometimes wonder when he writes in there, there's nothing that we can do now that hasn't been done by the ancients. What would he consider an ancient? Like, he's the ancient to us, right? This is the ancient of time. It's hard to get your mind around a time long before that. But he talks about this is the ancient times. They did everything we could have done. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth when you study history and you see what the Romans were capable of doing, that we still can't figure out how the Egyptians did certain things. There are things that the Babylonians did that we just go, how'd that happen? And that's not even talking about what civilization might have been like before the flood. You know, a civilization that God at the Tower of Babel, like even pre-existing Babel, where God would say of the people at Babel, because they have one language, anything they conceive of, anything they'll be able to do. That's pretty impressive, right? But he looks at all of this with all his understanding and says, what is it? It's nothing. It's empty. It's nothing. What am I to do with this? And then he says, not even just that, but people, when it comes, they're not even going to remember it. The next generations to follow, they're not even going to know it. Look at us. Think about all the history we do know, and that is not even a drop in the bucket of the ocean of the things that have happened on earth. The things we consider great deeds, how many don't we even know about? Right? Heck, we can't even remember half of things that happened before the Civil War in this country, and that was only 70 some odd years ago or something, 150, something like that. And so he says, this is my problem. And so he's going to tackle this problem. And he starts in verse 12. He says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under the heaven, meaning life. I want to know what life's about. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness, and I have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is also grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom there is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So he's talking about now his great wisdom. And there's a couple things that really stand out about this. And this is going to start seeing why Solomon is taking the view he is. First of all, who gave Solomon his wisdom? It was God, right? It was a God-given gift. He asked, God said, give me anything. I'll give you, he said to Solomon, ask of me anything and I'll give it to you. Solomon very wisely said, Lord, grant me wisdom. So he becomes the wisest man ever to walk this earth. Do you see one mention of him seeing to acknowledge here that God gave him this wisdom? He's talking about whose wisdom? My wisdom, my wisdom. I'm wise. I did this. I've done that. I sought it out. My heart understood. And now look at his conclusion with it. Why is it grasping the wind? Why is it vanity? For in much wisdom there is much grief. The more you know, not only does it drive you crazy when things don't go right, but it drives you crazy what other people don't know then, right? If you have perfect, could you imagine what it would be to be a king? And after you get over that first, however long it would be of like, wow, I nailed that one. I nailed that judgment. Yeah, cut the kid in half. Let's see who the real mother is. Right? And you're thinking, that's pretty cool. How boring would it get after a while? Like, you guys are still can't figure this out? Like, this is the 1,000th time this week someone has come to me about, he moved my property line or whatever it is. You imagine how tedious that would get for him over time. Because wisdom, if not properly applied, if not understood for its purpose, if it's just in of himself, it's going to lead to this grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So he's complaining about something that's supposed to be great, like wisdom, has led to sorrow and grief. So we are left with a conclusion to make about Solomon if you read between the lines. What is he actually using as a definition of something good and worth having? Something that makes him happy, right? Because if it leads to sorrow and grief, what's the point? It should lead to my pleasure. It should lead to my happiness. And he doesn't see it, and so he says, what's the point in this? It's vanity. Well, so here, his next natural step becomes, hey, I said to my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, and therefore enjoy pleasure. So he says, next I tried pleasure. Anything I thought could make me happy. This also was vanity. I said of laughter, it's madness. And of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly until I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their life. I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the Son of Men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eye desired, I did not keep it from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. And then I looked on all the works that my hands had done and on the labor which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity, and grasping for the wind, there was no profit under the sun. Listen to what he says, step by step, right? You see how detailed he actually is in laying out what I tried and how it ended up. He tried laughter. Let's make myself laugh, bring myself around people who make me laugh and feel good. And he said, madness. So I tried mirth. Mirth is, it's kind of like a more sensual kind of version of pleasure compared to like the laughter part. And he goes, vanity. What does it accomplish? He talks about, this man, it says he searched in my heart. That's his way of saying I studied, I contemplated. He sat there and contemplated, how can I get it close to drunk crazy and still keep my wisdom? That's what he says. He became like a professional bartender, basically. A guy mixing drinks, figuring out the best way to make wines and not like just go crazy like a drunk. Then I looked at how to lay hold of folly, foolishness, that I might see from the other side what it looks like. And none of that worked. And so he goes into, so by the way, I decided to build houses and vineyards and orchards and gardens. Then I saw, you know what, if you have all this, I need to irrigate these somehow. So he irrigated them all and got water diverted into his gardens, these great structures, architectural structures. He said, well, now I've got all these, I need people to fill them with. So he brought in his servants to take, all these servants to take into everything, greater possessions, brought in more herds and flocks. Solomon was filthy rich. It's interesting to do sometime. If you go through what he put in the temple, there's these golden shields he put in the temple. I had seen a calculation on it. It was probably less than a year ago. But it was based on the current value of gold, just like those, what was it, 20 to 30 shields? You remember, Scott, how many shields he put in the temple? It was something like 20 or 30, that ballpark. It was worth like $750,000 just the shields that he put in for decorations on the wall. That is how rich this man was. So rich, we're told, silver was basically looked at as the same as the rocks on the road. That's how rich he was. He had all of these things. And can you imagine him? Can you imagine him standing back, high point of view, go, look at this. And then, nope, didn't do it. Didn't make me happy. No. Not only did he get it, he built them himself. He did the work. He oversaw the work himself, and it was nothing to him. Let's do this next section, then we'll kind of bring some together here before we move on. It says, then I turned myself to consider wisdom and the madness of folly. For what can a man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceived that the same event happens to them all. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that is now will be forgotten in the days to come. Oh, how does a wise man die? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping of the wind. Then I hated all my labor which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. He thought highly of his son there, huh? Really loved his son. That I looked at the kid who I was going to leave it all to, and it depressed me. I hated my life when I thought about it. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? We find out he was a fool. And yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, with which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and great evil. For what has a man for all his labors, and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his works burdensome. Even in the night, his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a man than he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to man who is good in his sight. But the sinner he gives the work of the gathering and the collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. So let's look at this for a second. It's going to put in perspective why he stood up there, looked at all of these great things he accomplished, which history would praise him for. So he wasn't completely right in the fact that history did not forget King Solomon, right? We know who that guy was. We know how rich he was and the story of how wise he was and the things he accomplished. But part of what he did is he's going to realize, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Just put all that work and all that time and all that money into what? I can't enjoy it forever. It's going to be gone. And then he goes, and what's going to happen then? Looks down at Rehoboam, and it's like, ooh, not sure how this is going. I got to leave it to him. And who knows if he's going to be okay? We find out later he wasn't. And he just starts despairing. And look at the strength of this language. I hated my life. He despaired of living because everything he had poured himself into turned out to be emptiness. That's what it was. See, Solomon had lost perspective. First of all, we find out earlier on, right? He didn't credit God for his wisdom, even though it was God who gave him his wisdom. And look at how upset he is about the idea of an inheritance being passed down. Yet how did he get most of what he had? Because his father David passed it down to him. In fact, when you read this whole succession thing, part of the reason God put so much favor on Solomon was exactly because whose son was he? Because he was David's son. And there were promises God had given to David that he would pour those blessings out on his children for David's sake. See, the perspective is lost completely. Solomon has become so self-focused and so self-centered that everything's about him and what he can do and how great he is and how empty that is because it doesn't make him happy. And if this can happen to Solomon, is it any surprise why we have people walking around in the state of mind that they're in? A lot of people out there searching for the meaning in their life in pleasure right now. A lot of people out there seeking wealth to make them happy. A lot of people out there seeking wisdom to make them feel fulfilled. You guys have heard me say it. I talk to people in my office all the time. People who, I literally have people who are 50, 60 years old going for their doctorate degrees because they feel like they'll accomplish something by it, that it gives them meaning and purpose. Now, I'm not saying if they want to get it, fine, go get it. But what they're looking for out of it cannot be obtained. No different than the person seeking to win the lottery because they'll think it will make them happy. Just like so many of us, Solomon chased the world. But the one thing we can say for Solomon is at least he understood it didn't make him happy. He sat there and said, yeah, this is empty. You know how many people in this world never figure that out? They never figure it out. And part of it, I believe, and something we need to be careful of in our own lives, is it's part of the curse of technology the way we have it today, because before we can ever get tired of this one, what comes out? A brand new one. And before the next computer we can get tired of, what comes out? Before we've binged out on this Netflix series, what comes out? And one on Amazon we can watch, a brand new one. It's constantly moving from one thing to the next to distract us from that gaping hole in all of our lives. And so, I think this is a place to pause to say this, and we will come back to this in all likelihood. When you are dealing with family and friends, people who are so lost in their lives, people who walk around angry all the time, people who walk around depressed all the time. Instead of sitting there saying, well, what are you so angry about? What are you so depressed about? Maybe it's time to understand that if we were putting our hope in everything they were too, we'd be just as upset. What changes everything is eternity. This is what Jesus would teach. Jesus came and said, what about treasures? Should we seek the ones here? You know, it's very interesting, isn't it? Jesus told a parable. And he says there was a young, well-off farmer who had a great crop. And what does he say? He goes, you know what we're going to do? We're going to knock down this barn. We're going to build bigger barns. We're going to put all the crop in it. And I'm going to say, soul, enjoy yourself. You've earned it. We're going to live life easy. And what does Jesus say about him? Fool. You do not know that tonight your life will be required of you. And then whose will all of this be? Similar question to what Solomon asks. But in the same way, couldn't Jesus say the same thing about what Solomon did? Look at your gardens. Look at your houses. Look at all of this. We forget when you read about Solomon's life that by the time Solomon had died and the son that everything was left to, the people were begging for relief. They were begging, just give us a break. Your father, his taxes, the way he made us work, the way he made us do everything, we can't live like that anymore. It was so bad that it split the kingdom because his son didn't have the wisdom to say, yeah, you know what, I'll listen to you guys. Instead, he gave that famous line, my pinky shall be thicker than my father's waist. That's some line. People didn't take that too well, and they're like, David, where'd you go? Not David, I'm sorry, not David. I lost my, not Solomon, Jeroboam, thank you. Jeroboam, where'd you go? We want you instead. We like you better because you're going to be nice to us. And this is where Solomon finds himself. You know, but the one thing Solomon didn't have, for all his wisdom, he didn't have the knowledge we have. See, we can look back. There's one line that has stuck out to me, and I didn't pause on it at the time, but it's in chapter 1, where he says, what is crooked cannot be made straight. Because there's a promise about the Messiah, isn't there? God is going to make the crooked things straight. That is where our hope lies. Now, Solomon knew enough that he should have been turning to God through this at this time. But he was in this big old self-pity party, which many of us can be. And many are. And so let's go on. And this is going to be where it happens in Ecclesiastes from time to time, where he takes this little break and he almost writes things that sound like Proverbs. And this is going to be one of those sections. And he says, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. So I want to make one thing clear in there with this. When we're talking about the biblical thing of hatred, because sometimes people get confused over that, in the proper biblical context where you even see it condoned, like it's okay that God hated something, if it's not sin, like where it says, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated, it is not talking about emotional hatred, right? That is basically, it's what we love, we accept and bring in. When that term hated, it's a rejection of, Okay, so that's what it's saying, like with Jacob and Esau. Jacob, I have loved, I have accepted him in as the next chosen line through Messiah. Esau, I rejected him. Okay, just it's a good time to throw that out there. And so he's again just making an observation. He's making an observation for us that just says, listen, we go through these cycles again. Cycles he's bringing it back to. Sometimes we do this end of it, sometimes we do that end of it. And there's times for each of these things. So he goes on and says, what profit has the worker from that which he labors? I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time, and he has put eternity into their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that whatever God does, it shall be forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can be taken from it. God does it, that men should fear before him. That which has already been and what is to be has already been, and God requires an account of what is past. And so we see in Solomon, in his writing, particularly in this part, there is truth and wisdom that still comes out. And you can't help that. In a guy who's learned what Solomon has learned, a guy who has seen what Solomon has seen, you are going to get this still coming out, even in the despair. There's going to be moments of clarity. There's going to be some moments of truth, but still they will be in this larger context we're going to see where he's just struggling to grasp life and its meaning and its purpose. You know, I had an opportunity today. I was having lunch with a young man who I've known for many years now. And he just shared something with me. And it was encouraging in one sense, because you can tell God's been working in his heart. And what he said to me was, he goes, I wanted to ask you, have you ever looked at yourself and realized you're really not as good as you thought you were? I was like, yes, absolutely. There's nothing harder to do than to stare yourself in the face in the mirror and do an honest assessment. And we're not just talking about the physical that appears there, right? We're talking about it's a fearful thing to look into your own heart and see what's there. And I think that's actually where we're at this point in Ecclesiastes, where Solomon has kind of taken that look for a moment. And he's seen, I've been wrong, because this has not accomplished what I wanted it to accomplish. This is the first time in the book we see him mention eternity. Everything has been temporal to this point. Everything's been about what you can get on this earth. And see, again, that was what we were talking about with Jesus, right? Jesus made the point over and over and over again. Guys, this earth is dying. This earth is passing away. That was another mistake Solomon actually made early on in the book. He said, but the earth goes on forever. It doesn't. It is going to end. But you know it's not going to end. The kingdom of God. It will have no end. And God is the one who rewards us. It's a hard thing to wrap our minds around when we're going through difficulties in this earth. You know, because we are rightfully told God loves us. God does love us, doesn't he? The problem is what we think that means is God's going to make my life easy and happy. You see, the thing is, God also loves you and you and you and you and you and everybody out there in Seneca Falls and everyone down in Ovid and everyone over in Auburn and everyone in Waterloo, whether they know him or not. And there is one goal and objective for this work on earth, and that is to bring everybody into the kingdom of God, to extend that open invitation that God has given to every one of us, that we have, by the grace of God alone, just been so blessed to be able to enter into. And so when we think about, if you stop and think about all of the blood, sweat, and tears that others put into bringing you to the place you are with God, that God used as those earthly tools, the hand and feet to help accomplish his will, maybe we can understand a little bit why God may let us suffer for the sake of another a little bit. Why God, who did not spare his own son suffering, in fact, did not even spare his own life for the sake of our salvation, why would we think he would spare our earthly comfort for the sake of someone's salvation? And that is the big turn that Solomon doesn't really make. Now, and again, we have more knowledge than Solomon. And you know what else we have? This is crazy when you think about it. Solomon may have been the wisest man to ever live, but we have more ready access to all wisdom than he did, because we have the Holy Spirit indwelling us. God promised us in the book of James, what about wisdom? You lack it? What? Ask. I'll give it freely. You need more? Ask for more. You need more? Ask for more. I'll give it. I won't withhold this from you. So in one sense, though it's kind of crazy to think about it, Solomon has nothing on us. And we don't say that pridefully. We say that by the grace of God and his gift to us. And so what excuse do we have? What excuse do we have to go down these roads that he's already telling us don't bother? And so he's going to go on and say, moreover, I saw under the sun in the place of judgment, wickedness was there. And in the place of righteousness, iniquity was there. And I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in my heart, concerning the condition of the sons of men, God tests them, that they may see that they themselves are like animals. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them, and one dies, so does the other dies. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. So if we think it wasn't until Darwin came that people were thinking along this lines of, oh, we're just an animal. Nope, it was there before Darwin. All go to one place. All are from the dust. All return to the dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the animals, which goes down to the earth? So I perceive that nothing is better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? Now, that's a scary thought for Solomon to bring up, because what did Solomon say before? That was a source of despair for him. But he's basically saying that source of despair I just talked to, I figure that's the best we got. I figure the best is you might as well enjoy it while you got it, because you're going to die like the dog you buried the other day. That's what he's saying here. The hopelessness that's around him. And he says, then I returned and considered all the oppression that is done under the sun. And look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressors there is power, but they have no comforter. Therefore I praise the dead who are already dead more than the living who are still alive. Yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Solomon joins a list of people in the Bible who basically say, I wish I was never born. We got guys like Jonah, Jeremiah, Jacob. Lots of people have come to that point in their despair where they have said that. What brings in this time is the idea of injustice. The fact is, where I look to get justice, I find injustice. Where I look to see righteousness, I find wickedness. Can we relate to that today? Just a little bit. But weren't we told this was going to come? Why are we shouldn't be surprised. We were told this is going to happen. And here's the thing that I got to tell you. I want to say this in as humble a manner as I can, because I understand that we are looking back. I'm not in the place of Solomon. I've not experienced what he's experienced. But the thought has occurred to me. Could you imagine Solomon looking at all the government oppression, right? Because that's where justice came from, the government and the judges that were set up. He's looking at oppression. He's saying, people who have money and power are just oppressing the poor, and there's no help for them. Solomon, who are you again? You're the king. And what would happen if you took all of that money, wisdom, and time and effort you put into basically figuring out the best way to get drunk, how to build the best houses, how to irrigate the best things, buying and selling slaves, bringing in singers, and you actually put that to bringing justice to your country? What would that have looked like? Perhaps he would have found fulfillment. See, but this is what we have to be so careful of in our own walk. If we get caught up in our pity parties, and woe is me, how does this happen to me? Why did God let this happen? Then we are going to do the same thing. We are going to miss the opportunities for which God has placed us to take advantage of, the things he's gifted us with, the resources he's given us. I sometimes wonder, and this is self-reproach when I say this, we live in a nation that is freer and wealthier than any nation that has ever existed on this earth. And I wonder, how will the American church stand before God when we have to give an account for all he's given us and what we did with it? And maybe that means for me, I need to make some changes. Because I know, unfortunately, a large percentage of my time and my effort does exactly what Solomon did, seeking my own happiness, my own contentment, my own pleasure. And I understand it. If we're honest with each other, guys, what gets in the way? We like those things. See, this is one of those things that's really hard about being an American. We've been raised to like those things. Everywhere we turn, advertisers and marketers are telling us you need more. You deserve to be happy. What's missing in your life? You know what? You can put it on credit and we'll give it to you. You don't even need to have the money right now. And they enslave us. Where when you read so much of the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, what is the message? You want to find happiness, you want to find freedom, you want to find contentment, you want to find meaning, give it away. Just take these things and use them for the kingdom of God. That doesn't mean we neglect our families. That doesn't mean we neglect the raising of our children. We do all of those things. It doesn't mean we neglect the work we have to do in our daily life that God has placed us in. But what it does mean is we have to evaluate what is it we're really after. Because we have the answer right here in this book. We know where it's going to lead if we're after those things of pleasure and wisdom and wealth and popularity and all of these things. It's going to fail. Absolutely 100% guaranteed. There's not a single person who has read through your Bible, especially if you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, who's going to be able to stand before God on Judgment Day and say, God, why didn't you tell me there was no fulfillment in that? Because he did tell us. You know, I've shared with you before, so I'm not going to go into the whole story of my friend Mirza, who I met over at New York Chiropractic, who was from Afghanistan, and the one who was captured by the Russians in the Soviet-Afghani war and tortured by them as a teenage boy, and how that so changed his view of life. It didn't harden him, by the way. It made him appreciative. It made him be like, so what if I don't get the best grade on this test? It's better than where I've been. We just received news that he is in the hospital with cancer right now. And and a very deadly cancer. And he and I have his wife reached out to us to let us know and asked that we'd pray for him. So I would appreciate if you guys would be praying for Mirza. He's Muslim, and we've just started talking again, he and I. And to even listen to him, we have to be really careful. Sometimes I think we can walk around and think, oh, it's only Christians who have a monopoly on contentment in difficult situations. No, he's very content in his difficult situation. You see, but what it is you'll find people who aren't saved who can be content in hard situations and have great attitudes because, well, maybe the life he's seen in his past, what can he complain about here in America? Maybe because, you know what? There are unbelievers, this is going to be a shocker, there are unbelievers who have good marriages that actually love their spouses. See, Christians aren't the only ones with a monopoly on good relationships and good attitudes. But you know what is true? That we have no excuse for not having one. See, the thing is, we shouldn't marvel that we find it out in the world. What really should bring us to our knees in repentance is the fact that we don't find it in the church. And that's not to say we don't have hard things. That's not to say we don't go through difficulties, things that will bring us to tears, things that will bring us to our knees. But we know the truth. We know the price that's been paid for us. We know what our eternity holds. We know this is passing. And so we need to keep that in mind, lest we end up sounding a whole lot like Solomon. And we can get a little more done here. So we're in chapter 4 here. Verse 4. And then I saw that all toil and every skillful work of man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping in the wind. The fool folds his hand and consumes his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both hands full together with toil and grasping for the wind. Then I returned and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, one without companion. He neither has son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and grave misfortune. He's kind of talking about the workaholic there. In our culture, that's what that would be. The workaholic who's nobody's left with him, but all he does is keep working. Two are better than one, because they have good reward for their labor. If they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Very famous wedding verse people like to use, right? The threefold cord of husband, a wife, and Jesus. You know, there was, the thought left me. Well, we'll come back to it if I remember it. He goes on and says, better a poor and wise youth than an old foolish king who will be admonished no more. For he comes out of prison to be king, though he has been born poor in his kingdom. And I saw all the living who walk under the sun, and they were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end to all the people over who he was made king. Yet those who come after will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping of the wind. So he's talking about succession now of a king. He's talking about kingdom being taken and give it to another. It makes me wonder, we don't know this for sure, but did he write Ecclesiastes after the prophecy was given to him that the kingdom would be taken from him? Because he's clearly got it on his mind and talks about the vanity of it. And you know what? This is one thing that I find very interesting. With this mindset of a man that was trying to seek anything to fill a void, maybe it's not so surprising he had 700 wives. Because what did he say? I withheld nothing from myself which my eye desired. So that would explain how you get that many wives, wouldn't it? She's beautiful. I want her. Take her. It's just an interesting thought, because don't you read that sometimes and you go, how did you get there exactly? Well, this is a good way to get there. Because, again, that self-centered nature seeking to please himself. And so what I want to do, you guys can read through the middle. Very much of the rest of the book is the same kind of theme, some more details of what he did. I do want to jump to the end. And we're going to start in chapter 12, verse 9. He says, and moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. Now, right before that, he says again, everything is vanity. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But because he was wise, that's why he says he still taught the people. So he was doing this without his whole heart behind it. He's like, I know it's all pointless, but you know what? I might as well teach you wisdom anyway. And he set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright and words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Of the making of many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. So let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. There it is. All of that misery and all of that pointlessness and all of that vanity of life gets boiled down to those things. Think about that for a second. Let's put it in a New Testament context, because you realize, we finally get to some solid truth right here. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is man's all. A ruler came to Jesus and said, what's the greatest commandment? And what was it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus said, what? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. So this boils down to fear God and do what he says because you love him. In the New Testament sense, excuse me, for God will bring every work into judgment. Do we see that in the New Testament? We do. Corinthians talks about every man's work will be judged by fire. And what will last is what is gold and silver and jewels, and what will be burned away is the wood, hay, and stubble. That picture of the wood, hay, and stubble is all this world stuff. And the eternal stuff is the gold and the silver and the jewels, the precious jewels, including every secret thing. That's in there too in the New Testament, isn't it? That nothing can be hidden. Every work will be brought to light, whether good or evil. You're not going to stand before God and have him miss something. Like, I hope he doesn't remember this. I hope he doesn't remember this. No, it's coming up one way or the other. And on the same token, you can reverse that because it says for good or evil. And when we do something that was right to do, that came at cost and sacrifice, we never have to wonder, I wonder if God noticed. That will be rewarded the same way. So we see this is good, solid principles that we find Old Testament and New Testament. So guys, what do we boil this down to, right? We've already talked about some of the application of this, but I look at this book and I really see in this, you want to know if, especially for those of us who grew up in the church, for those of us who have not been like full-blown out in the world, like never even thought of God, never had any restraint on ourselves. You want to know what it's like to do that? Right here's what it's like to do that. I think we could probably get an agreement from those who have been full-blown out into the world. But as Christians, we understand too, as you dabble, you get much closer to this as well. But I think what it should do is help us to understand a couple things. One, how we need to be praying for those who are lost. right? Sometimes it's just so easy, especially in this time we're looking at, and you see the unrighteousness and you see the stuff that's just crazy, and you just want to be like, God, go get them, right? God, just smite them, bring it to an end. But they're so lost, and there is only one answer for them. And you know, there's part of us that will always rejoice in justice when God will bring, because you know what? There will be that wrath, that day of reckoning's coming. As it said at the end, God will judge every work. No one's getting away with anything. And though we can rejoice in God's justice, when we understand the mercy we've been shown, it helps us to have broken hearts for those who have not entered into that yet, knowing what is awaiting them if they do not enter into it. But that costs us something. It's much more uncomfortable to be praying, really praying for the lost, than it is to sit around and watch a movie we enjoy watching with buddies, right? That's a lot more fun. Because I hear people say, I've been guilty of saying it myself, sometimes I start to pray and I just don't know what to pray for. Well, why don't you just start with every unsaved person you know? That will last you a while, right? Pray for their salvation. Ask God, how can I show them your love? Lord, bring people into their lives that will show them. And for us also, to just get our eyes off ourselves and put them on Him, the one who paid everything for us. Because this I can say 100%, because the Bible says it, and because I can say I have tested it in my life. Not perfectly all the time, but the times I've done it, it works. When I take my eyes off my problems, my heartaches, and all the difficulties, and I put them on Him, it doesn't make them go away, but it's amazing how they lose all their power. They no longer oppress me, and I have freedom and joy even in the sorrow. So, Lord, we pray that you would just help us in these situations, Lord. Help turn our eyes and our minds towards the unsaved that we know that you've put in our lives. Help us to use our time, our energies, our resources that you've given us for the sake of your kingdom. And Lord, for anyone here who is struggling right now and knows that tug to look inward, and knows that tug to focus on the problems around us, I pray that you would gently be drawing their eyes to you to see the love you have for them. In Jesus' name, amen.